welcome back to our Non-Toxic Podcast. I'm Hannah, and I'm here for another wonderful episode of me talking to myself, maybe a little sarcastic. So before this episode began, just to give you some backstory, I'm here, obviously, in the stewed, and I am just not warm this morning. I don't know what it is, if I'm just feeling especially uncomfortable just talking to myself, but I seriously stood there like a sim that hasn't been given an instruction for probably 3 minutes, just thinking through what I have to say. It doesn't help that I forgot to bring my iPad this morning, and that's usually what I hold my notes on because I've got my laptop recording audio, and then I've got the phone recording video, which a lot of people don't realize it's not that high tech. It's just an iPhone 13 that's recording the video. So the production value, moderate to severe, but that's okay. We're drinking a Moon Mallow from Urban Grounds this morning. It is going off of the menu on Saturday, which is going to be Memorial Day weekend, and I'm devastated, as you can imagine. The thing is, I know they're going to replace it with something delicious and amazing, and it's going to be fantastic, and I have no reason to fret, but it's just not in my nature not to fret, so I'm consuming an abnormal amount of these. Usually I have probably 3 to 4 outside coffees per week, meaning out of the house, but knowing this is going off the menu, I'm really upping my dose. So I've spoken with my doctor. Everything is great. He said that, yes, you should really make the most of this. In other news, I am wearing a tie. I don't know if you guys are watching on YouTube. This is my garage sale tie. I got it for $25. It's very cute, arguably. I was going to wear another fun garage sale item that I got, but since I'm talking about something more on the professional side today, I thought I would dress the part and wear a tie, even though I'm wearing it incorrectly and with ripped jeans, and nothing I say is ever really that professional. So take that with a grain of salt. Next, I am so happy that everyone loved last week's episode. Haley is amazing. She's brilliant and inspiring and fantastic, and her story was so vulnerable and passionate, and I was so touched by the amount of people that had reached out saying how impactful it was and eye-opening, just that you never really know what's going on behind the scenes with somebody. So shout out to you, Haley. You're an amazing guest. You're an amazing friend, and I'm so happy that you gave your time. Funny story for you guys. Just to paint a picture, I'm at coffee with my husband. Actually, let me backtrack. The reason that we were at coffee is because that he had almost passed out. So I was doing my best to nourish him by taking him to Urban Grounds, as one does. And we had been having this sinus issue of his for a couple years now, where he's been complaining of like pressure behind his eyes and everything. And I don't know if any other wives know this, but men can sometimes be a little bit oversensitive to things that might plague them physically, to their various ailments. Mine is no different. He has the standard model of hypochondria for men. So I have had this conversation with him many times where I'm like, does it really hurt you to the point of needing medical intervention with anything? Or are you just feeling it? Because there are different times that I'm just conscious of like, yeah, I'm having some kind of a stomach issue, but I think that's just part of having a stomach. It doesn't necessarily require medical intervention. Or a headache. Am I having a severe headache? Is there something wrong? Or is this just maybe the result of me being a person with those body parts? I digress. So he's very strong, manly, tough in many areas. When it comes to his physical health, sometimes it's not always the case. So we've had this like boy who cried wolf thing where I'm like, I just need to know when it's actually serious so that I can take the necessary medical steps as your wife to advocate for you. So pair his paranoia with his inherent bias against any kind of medical intervention. He doesn't like to have things done. He doesn't like doctors, needles, things like that. A little white coat syndrome, if you will. So you can see how we're in a real predicament. We're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in a big old pickle. And he's been complaining of this issue. He's had so many sinus infections. Anytime that we get the same sickness, it's always the situation where I get the sickness after him, usually due to being such a loving wife and taking care of him, or, living in the same house. But I get the sickness before him and then I get over it faster. And while I would love to say that's just my heightened immune system and that I'm so great at fighting off diseases internally, I just think that my body has cleared them out faster because he's got this sinus issue that has remained a question mark up until now. I'm getting to the point, I promise. So he's had these appointments. He had an MRI. He's had a couple things, and they found this blockage in his sinus cavity. So for a while, we had these different things we were doing at home, like, doing the flushing system. That's always really pleasant and romantic. But I'm a champ, and I did do that for him. just different things. And they have not worked up to this point. So finally, he has this recommendation for surgery. So we have a surgical consult. We go in, and it's supposed to be just a normal sinus procedure where they go in, it's what is it, laparoscopic. It's the little tiny instruments that go in, and they basically clean out all of your sinuses, everything that's gotten blocked up there, because he's got significant like Missouri construction in the summertime level blockages. So they're going to snake it like a drain, clear everything out, and then widen everything because I guess some people's sinuses are just predispositioned to getting clogged and like not draining easily. So they're going to widen those suckers out so that this doesn't happen in the future. However, if you don't know, my husband played college basketball. He played for 2 decades of the sport, and it's apparently pretty rough. I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen a full game. So don't quote me on that. But he has been hit in the face many times because even though he's 6'3", apparently that's very small for Division I basketball. So he was like the little guy on the court, and that is like right around, shoulder, elbow level. So he's taken a few limbs to the face. Come to find out that would be an issue in our adult life. I thought he just had this cute like Owen Wilson thing going on. No, he has all kinds of internal damage to his nose. So the doctor's looking through and she's like, oh, yeah, we have to do the other procedure to alleviate the sinus issue, but you have such extensive damage to your septum and to your nose cavities, like the structure of your nose. I won't be able to do that unless we do a full septoplasty. And basically she starts describing the procedure where they do an incision underneath the nose right here, peel up your nose skin, the flesh over your nose. Sorry, trigger warning, gross. Lift it up. And then they have to go through and like break and rebuild this internal little passageway. So Austin already doesn't do the best with medical news. Usually if I am even talking about like, I don't know, one time I explained to him what an epidural was and he was like, you're gonna have to stop, I'm gonna pass out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's theoretical for now. And you never even have to get one. So that's beside the point. He can be a tad squeamish. So I can see him in the chair getting like a little bit uncomfy, like he's doing a little shifty shift. And I'm listening, of course, intently to the doctor as his caretaker in that moment. So she proceeds to then say, we'll go through, we'll rebuild that, we'll clean everything out, and then we have to pack it with gauze, and you'll have a splint in for a week. So it goes up your nose. It's like kind of compacted. I'm sure you guys have seen on TikTok if you see people like with the post-nose surgery bandages. And it's not a rhinoplasty. I'm not really sure the difference. I could have, I guess, given it a quick Google with intent to be informed, but I did not do that. So my apologies. But to my understanding, the septoplasty is like more internal and kind of underneath, where the rhinoplasty is more the outside of your nose, but that might be fully off base. So he's going to have this thing packed. She's like, you're probably going to have some blood and, some mucus leakage. So we're going to have that drain pad underneath your nose. You're going to have some swelling, probably some bruising around your eye. And I can see him. He's just not looking so good. I said, do you need to sit back? And he's like, yeah, I think so. So the doctor like kind of sits him back and she gives him like some water and everything. And he's doing okay. And then she continues to explain it. And you don't want to, I don't know. Doctors are amazing and brilliant, but at the same time, I'm like, this is obviously not having the intended result. Let's maybe table this conversation, give it a commercial break. We'll come back. We'll finish it out. So, and of course he doesn't eat breakfast because he's a man and men just survive on pure rage and I don't know, the talk of economics in the world. So he hasn't had anything this morning. So he's got nothing to sustain him. He's green around the edges. She has this conversation. I kind of take over. We have the scheduling conversation, all the risks, blah, blah, blah. We do all of that. And then we're walking out and they say something else. They give us some information. And it has more of like the disclaimers and the warnings. So we're walking out and he's like, I am going to sit back down. And then he takes his seat and he's like, I just feel like coming back on. And everyone who is like prone to passing out knows you start to get that weird like hot flash. And then it's like in conjunction with a cold sweat and your ears start to ring and your vision starts to get all like foggy. I've had that happen several times, like whenever I'm donating blood. And it's just once you start to know, the thing I've learned is that you can't fight it. And actually what made me really give in to medical intervention in those situations is that one time I passed out after trying to fight it and like trying to walk around and being kind of like, okay. And then I went down. One, the embarrassment of passing out in front of the entire blood center where everyone, you wake up and there's like, it's like a scene in a TV show where there's faces like all around you and you're kind of confused. You're like, oh, what happened? One of the nurses was like, hey, you need to be aware that if you pass out, you do lose all bowel and bladder control. So if you ever pass out and you have to use the restroom, like it's all just going to come out, just so you know. So it's better not to fight it, just to lay down. let it pass, and then you can get back up. And that scared me straight. I did not want to have any accidents in the future. So now if I start to feel it in any situation, I'm like, I'm just going to sit for a moment. I'm just going to sit back down. And guess what? That is easier and better than trying to tough it out. There's no reason to tough it out because it's just more embarrassing if you go down. Speaking to myself. Anywho, so we leave, everything's fine. And I'm like, we should probably get you some breakfast or something because what a morning to find out that we're having the surgery and also to have a little queasiness in the tummy. So we went and got Urban Grounds, of course. Also, that was a treat for me because I'm such a kind wife. Just kidding. I don't require a treat for that. It's just always nice. So we're sitting there having coffee. I'm having coffee. He's having toast. The chili avo toasty, by the way, fantastic. And we're just discussing how much fun he's going to have the week of June 24th. Mark your calendars, guys. It's going to be a blast. And he's looking at me and he's like, hey, smile. So I'm like, give him a smile. And he's looking at me. And you can always tell when someone's not looking at your eyes or just kind of looking at your face. And you're like, what? So he's looking at me and he's like, it's crazy how none of your teeth touch. Sorry, my mom just texted me. I thought that was on mute. My mistake. I'm not going to go mute it. So I said, what did you just say to me? And he said, no, like your teeth, like they're straight, but they just don't really touch each other. I'm like, what on earth would possess you to look me in my face and say that? It's the middle of the day, the sun's out. You're going to look your wife that you're supposed to love and cherish and protect and give me this new insecurity that I've never even thought of before. And granted, I've thought of it with my two front teeth because when that phenomenon went around a couple years ago about American Girl doll teeth, where you have these two teeth that whenever you're speaking, only the front two show, that is unfortunately the case with me. And I didn't know that was even a thing until the internet was so kind as to enlighten me that that's a condition that I have. And one of my clients is a cosmetic dentist, and I was talking to her and I'm like, do you think I should fix this? Because here's the thing. My teeth are straight. I've not had braces, so they're not perfectly straight, but they're straight enough as the dentist of my childhood had deemed. He said, that'll do. That pretty much describes a lot about me. That'll do. We don't need any further intervention. That's going to suffice. So I never was like bothered by my teeth. I'm like, they're straight. The dentist said they were good. And now upon hearing all of these things from TikTok and my husband, AKA the two most influential resources in my life, now I'm like, okay, do I need to do something about my teeth? So I was talking to my client and she's like, honestly, you just have rounded teeth. Like some people's teeth are very perfectly like rectangular, square. They have the sharp edges. Yours are more rounded. So whenever you aren't smiling and like showing the full root of the teeth, then the rounded edges are kind of what you see. And it can lead to that like almost like buck tooth appearance. She didn't say that, but that's like what she meant to say. That's what the sentiment was. And that's okay because that's the truth. And I don't know where I was really going with that. But moral of the story, she's like, oh, a lot of people actually pay for that to happen when they get veneers. They get these expensive sets of veneers and they don't want them to look too fake or too, perfect. So they have the edges rounded. So it gives them a more youthful appearance and it can kind of not age your face as much as perfectly straight teeth can. So I took that and I was like, yeah, this makes me look younger. This is good. This is a gift from the Lord. And I'll bring that back around to my philosophy on plastic surgeries and cosmetic enhancements. Because while I am very pro Botox, I'm hopefully getting some in 2 days because we're starting to wear off. So Brie, I'll be seeing you. But I obviously have, as anyone does, insecurities that I would love to address. But if it's not something that is bothering me on a daily basis, I really don't want to do anything about it because it's just such a slippery slope. And once I start, I think that it would be very difficult to start to pump the brakes. And there's nothing wrong with, if you're somebody who just is like, it's Tuesday, let's get some filler. That's great. That's good for you. For me, though, I think that I've struggled with, I'm not going to act like I'm special. I, like most people, have struggled with insecurity my whole life, whether it's skin related or weight related or, height or hair color or anything else. And I've gotten to a point where I'm happy with most of those things about myself now. And I think if I start to take on the mentality that everything can be changed, then I will never want to stop doing that. So for me, I get Botox like in my forehead up here where I really scrunch up and then right between my eyes. It's typically like 11 lines is what they call them in the industry. And I don't have 11 lines. I have just like one crevasse and it was double deep. So I get all of that kind of snatched up. And sometimes I get a lip flip, which is Botox in your upper lip that makes it relax a little bit more. So whenever you smile, it's just kind of like, I don't know how to explain it. It just doesn't pull as taut over your teeth. So it can look a little bit plumper, but it's not quite as intense as lip filler. Also, filler freaks me out just because I've worked with so many med spas and seen it done. I don't think I could get out of my head enough to receive it, even though everyone who I've seen have it done loves it and has a good experience. There's just something about being on the other side of it, but not quite being in the medical realm to be immune to how gross it can be. But Botox, no big deal. It's quick, it's easy. Brie has just the hand of an angel. It's light, she's perfect. So if you're considering it, I would recommend her, obviously. But all that to say, that's the thing that I really was insecure about, because every time I was looking in the mirror, I was noticing that my makeup was creasing right there, or if I was taking photos, even if I wasn't making that face, which I tend to do a lot. I guess scowling is just part of my main persona, but also probably from the extensive amount of blue light that I take on in the dark rooms late at night, I've just made myself squint. So whenever I wasn't even making those faces, the divots, the wrinkles would remain. And this started whenever I was probably, I think it's my wedding year. So I was 22, which is young, both to get Botox and to get married. But hey, this is the Midwest. So I remember taking a photo, and I had been noticing it so many times. I'm like, what is going on? Like, why do I have this divot in my forehead that no one else seems to have? And I just DM'd Brie some photos, and I was like, can you please get me in? I was on a flight, and the light comes in from the side, just illuminates every bit of texture, everything on your face that you don't want to see. I don't book window seats anymore. All that to say. But she was like, yeah, I can get you in. Let's do a consult. I went in for the consult. We ended up chit-chatting. I'm like, why don't I just do it today? So then we went ahead and did it. It was great. And that is literally how we became friends and how this whole podcast began in the first place. So again, I'm getting way off track, but that's my plastic surgery story. And I was joking with Austin, like, of course you would get a nose job before I do, because he's just the worst in that way. And I used to always want a nose job because I thought that it was too big for my face. Don't start looking at it now that I've pointed that out to you. But now it's just not something that I notice every day. It's something that occasionally, like in certain photos, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what a schnoz. Or, you see a side profile photo, you're like, ooh, brother, ooh. And that is whenever I start to get into my own head. And then I think about it. I'm like, that's one every, I don't know, few weeks, maybe every few months that I'm noticing it. That's not enough for me personally to change. So I am never going to be pro or anti cosmetic enhancements. I think it's just up to each person. But my personal philosophy is that if it's not something that's taking away from my everyday life, if it's not something that is really making me think like, I do not like this, every time I see myself in the mirror or in photos and I'm disliking it, then that would be the situation where I'm looking to change something. But as of now, everything, much like my teeth, I'm like, yeah, that'll do. That's decent. Sorry for kind of losing the plot there for a second. I didn't really mean to get so off course, but yeah, my husband unlocked a whole new insecurity. So that's really great. I think sometimes being married is, imagine like having young children that just, they say whatever comes to their mind and they don't mean it harshly. He doesn't mean to say anything, but I'm like, so what did you think that was going to do for me? What did you think I was going to say? Like, oh, wow, what a beautiful and magical observation. Thank you so much for bringing that to my attention. What else would you like to say as you whisper these sweet nothings into my ear after I just prevented you from passing out at Cox Hospital? Anyways, moving right along. Our air conditioning is out again. So I don't know if you can tell, but my hair is a disaster once again because I could not bring myself to use heat. But that goes along with what I promised you guys last time, where I'm going to try and use less heat in my hair. I would have been a hypocrite if the AC were still on. So this is going to be pool hair, circa like 2 days ago, and we're just rocking with it. But let me paint you a picture. Our air conditioning, first of all, our house is not even 3 years old yet. It was built the year we got married, which is 2021, and we closed on it in September, October. So it's not quite 3 years old, almost, but not quite. And last year, when it was not quite 2 years old yet, on Mother's Day weekend, our air conditioning went out completely. And it was the first hot weekend of the year, naturally. And we did not know what was going on. We called somebody. It took them a couple days to get out there. Then when they got out there, they were like, oh, part of your unit is frozen, which baffles my little pea brain because I'm like, it's 95 degrees. How is our air conditioning frozen? But allegedly, there's some kind of coolant in the system that causes the air to be conditioned, and that can freeze if it's working too hard. So then they had to come back in a couple more days after we had had the air conditioning completely off so it could thaw out. Then they had to order the part. Then we had to wait for that to come in, and then they fixed it. Altogether, like 2 weeks of no air conditioning, which I know is such a first world, like champagne problem. But whenever you are trying to do basic things, like I work from home, it's super hot outside. You can't cook because it just makes the house hotter. You can't do laundry because it makes the house hotter. And we're so fortunate to have friends and both sets of parents that have extra rooms. And are like, oh, come stay with us. But it's just that displacement in the middle of your week where it's it's such a blessing to have that. But just to pack a bag, you're like, okay, do I pack all my makeup and then get ready there? That's a lot to pack. Or do I just go over there to sleep, come back, get ready when it's hot? Then every time you get ready, it's just the whole thing. It's just irritating to be displaced. And fortunately, we don't have kids, we don't have pets. It's pretty easy for us to get displaced and to not be too shaken up about it, but it's still frustrating. So that happened last year, and it was over Mother's Day weekend, and I was like trying to make my mom homemade cinnamon rolls, like the 2 times I bake a year, and the house is 88 degrees, and I'm crying and I'm sweating, and it was just so frustrating. So I have mild homeowner PTSD from that. And this year, we come home on Saturday. We keep our house about 68 all year round. It's just consistent. We like to be chilled. And the house is at 73. We're like, that's odd because we've never had it set above 70. That's crazy. So then Austin goes outside and he starts to look at the air conditioning unit. I don't know what he looks at. Those things, it's like looking at, into the ether. I can't even tell what we're seeing. But he's like, it's starting to frost up. Let's turn it off for a little bit. So we turn it off. We call this company that did it last year. I'm like, hey, give us a call back. This isn't good. It hasn't, obviously, the repair hasn't stuck. And if you're not watching it in real time, this is exactly a year later. Mother's Day weekend was 2 weekends ago. So when this happened, this is exactly 1 year and 1 week after our previous repair. They didn't call us back. Monday comes and goes. The next business day, they don't answer. So we call a different company, like, hey, can you come look at this? Because it's just getting hotter. So they were awesome, sent somebody out the same day. They're like, yeah, there's a bunch of leaks here. It looks like whatever happened last year wasn't great, blah, blah, blah. And so we've been trying to get a hold of the other company. We're like, hey, this was a year ago, like just over a year ago, 53 weeks. Can you please help us? And they said, no can do. You are out of warranty. The part was under warranty for a year. Now it has been a year and a week. So what's really great is that we're not getting any help with that. We are going to have to pay for the work to be done again. And it's just that difficult thing because as business owners ourselves, we understand how difficult it can be to manage all of these. My husband works in masonry, and as a business owner in that space, there's a lot of things that you just have to do for free because you need to make it right and you want to have a good reputation in the community. But also there are things that are just outside of your control where everything can be done right and things just break or things go wrong or parts were manufactured incorrectly or whatever. And then that's frustrating because you don't want to be held liable for something that wasn't necessarily your mistake. So then we're over here like, okay, nobody wants to be a Karen. Nobody wants to be that person that's like, you need to get out here and fix your work because it wasn't done right, whatever. So we're having this whole debate. I'm like, we're, people of God, we should be kind and forgiving and understanding, but also we don't want to get walked on. And I'm like, this house is so new. The air conditioner's new. We just had it fixed a year ago. Like, what is the problem here? Why is this continuing to happen? Also, a year and a week, that's pretty, come on, like that's pretty close. We should just go ahead and blur that line, go ahead and get it fixed. I don't know. So we've just been dealing with that. It's been like 5 days. It's not horrible. We have a bunch of fans in the house. We've been treating it like a whole mausoleum. Like we have the blackout shades all pulled down. We're not really even using lights in the house. I haven't been using heat on my hair. I did laundry, but like on low heat, and we just haven't been cooking, which of course is never a problem with me. I'll pick up Qdoba. We had tuna salad last night. That was kind of cooking, but like no heat. It was just mixing. It was stirring. So yeah, trying to be positive because again, I know that there are much worse things happening in this life, in this world, but it's just frustrating. So if you guys know anything about HVAC and have any tips, then please let me know. Although the air conditioning guy is supposed to come this afternoon and hopefully restore it so that I can go back and fry the absolute life out of my hair for the next episode. Moving right along. Let me give you guys a report. I promise there's a topic in here somewhere, but I'm reading the same thing. Honestly, you guys, I shouldn't admit this, but I've been reading a lot of fan fiction. I'm not going to go into it because that's personal, but sometimes whenever you're just really into a piece of media and the producers of said media have not given me enough to consume, I have to resort to what, 12 to 14-year-olds have written online. And then I use that to kind of fill my cup. So that's what I've been doing lately. Yes, I have been staying up until 3 a.m. on my phone, but that's neither here nor there. If you see me with bags under my eyes, just don't make a comment. Don't be my husband. Don't make a comment. Eating, whatever. I don't have to cook, obviously. Oh, I always forget. Playing. Okay, I've been listening to a lot of pop lately, and pop is usually not my jam. I like it sometimes, but sometimes it's just too peppy for me. That was kind of Kendall Jenner of me to say. I'm just not like other girls. Like I just don't like pop music. I don't know. I do, actually. I've been listening to Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter on repeat. Chapel Roan, I think is how you say her name. I just discovered her. Everything she has is a banger. They're not all appropriate, so Actually, I don't have any listeners, I don't think, that are young enough to warrant that. But it's great. It's like plucky and happy and fun. And I'm just like driving down the street, dodging construction cones because, Missouri, and just having a good old time. So she's great. A lot of pop music. Playing, obsessing. I don't really have a huge obsession. I'm still on Ted Lasso pretty heavy. I'm in that stage of obsession where I've like watched the entire thing and now I can go and consume the content. So I'm like working through all of the press tours and the actor interviews. Like, you know how they do press tours and then the directors and the producers and the writers are talking about like, well, here's what we wanted to accomplish with that scene. And here's what we really were trying to convey with this. And I love that. I don't know why I don't produce movies. I don't want to produce movies. I just love it. So that's kind of the stages I'm working through. Also, whenever you get on TikTok and then you see all the edits that people make and they'll find two completely platonic characters and be like, they're in love and you can't convince me otherwise. Meanwhile, the characters have shared like 3 scenes and there was nothing romantic at all about the scenes. That's kind of where I'm at right now. And obsessing. Not me forgetting how to spell report every single time. Reading, eating, playing, obsessing, recommending, moon mallow goes off the menu Saturday. Treating, also moon mallow goes off the menu on Saturday. So beware of that. We have a Morgan Wallen concert this Saturday, as I'm sure a lot of people in the area do. It's going to be great. I have no outfit ideas picked out yet, but that is neither here nor there. I will be a different person by Saturday, and I will choose it when the time comes. Coffee break. Sorry, that was kind of extensive. Also, if you see this precarious coffee cup over here, just keep an eye on it for me because your girl might knock it over with my wild gesticulations. Anywho, I would like to give myself a little pat on the back, except not really. My business is officially 3 years old, Hannah McClellan Media, which I'm just going to start from the beginning. If I would have known that this was going to become my livelihood and it was going to, outlast my corporate career, I would have probably not named it something so generic and something so predictable and cumbersome because it's kind of lengthy. But here's the logic. Let me just go back from the beginning because I don't think I've ever told this story kind of at length. I think Brie and I did an episode about how we kind of got into our businesses, but I've not talked about everything like in such detail. So my 3-year business anniversary was on the 18th, and it's a little bit tricky because I have 2 anniversaries. There's the anniversary of whenever I actually started my LLC, which is in February, and then the anniversary of when I quit my job, which is what I do celebrate, which is in May. Because beforehand, it was kind of just like a side hustle, and then quitting my job was whenever it was legitimized in my world. So that's what I tend to celebrate. Back whenever I was in, of course, backtrack. I went to high school at Nixa. I graduated. I was 17. I moved out. I worked at the bank and Texas Roadhouse. I was like grinding, going to school online. Then I switched to working full-time at a bank. I was a personal banker, worked 40 hours a week, and was also going to school online. Moved to a different job. I was working in more like credit analysis at a bank, also going to school full-time online. Graduated, got my degree in finance, still working at a bank, doing credit analysis, working in commercial lending, a lot of like document prep, tax return type stuff. Great if you're nosy, not great if you're easily bored. So it was kind of like a split 50-50 for me, but I liked it. And then I went to go work at a construction company, which I know is wild, but it was through a connection that I had from previous volunteer work. And it was to work in accounting there, like bookkeeping. And I had no experience, but it was one of those situations like if you're a hard worker and I like you as a person, you're going to get offered this job and like we can teach you the rest. So I took this job and I didn't dislike it. I actually learned a lot about construction, which is interesting, especially now that we have a masonry company that we're part owners of. That did help me learn a lot of things that I would need to know in the future. So props to the big man on that one because that proved to be useful. And it was for a little bit more money, but nothing crazy. So I enjoyed it, learned a lot of things. I was in way out of my depth. Okay, I'll mute it. I'm sorry, hang on. Anywho, I was in way out of my depth. I did not know what flashing was. I didn't know what, waterproofing. Obviously, I know what waterproofing is, but like in the context of construction, none of these things were really in my realm. And also imagine me stepping out onto a job site with my, my hard hat and my clipboard being like, okay, so where are we at with construction on this one? I'm not kidding you. That's what I had to do. And I'm so indebted to the woman who thought that I was a good fit for that position. I think she was wrong, but that's okay because you learn, you grow, and like being challenged, I think helps you find your limits. Even if you can't quite meet them, you find out where you go. Like wherever the expectation is, if you fall short, like if you didn't have a job that challenged you, you wouldn't have had the capacity and the depth to find out how far you could go, if that makes sense. So I did learn a lot. I liked my coworkers, and throughout the course of that job, I had someone approach me that was looking to run a city council campaign, and it was kind of like friends of friends, and they were like, we need someone to do the Facebook and something, like we just don't really know all that. And I always thought it was kind of funny because it was these influential, affluent, successful businessmen, and like, we just need someone to post on Facebook, like we just don't know what we're doing. So they called me, little old me, and I knew social media was kind of becoming a thing, but it was a thing. Obviously it was a thing. It just wasn't really something that in the Midwest people did as a career quite yet. So I've always loved social media. I've always been obnoxious. I will one day expose all of the different eras I've had on social media, and it'll be very cringy, and we'll all need to take a little breather after that, but not today. So they asked me to write a quote for them, how I would price it, how I would run the social media. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I quoted it super low, but they ended up accepting it. And it was low looking back, like retrospectively. But at the time, I'm like, they're going to pay me what? They're going to pay me what to post on social media? So I was freaking out. And in order to accept money from a campaign, even at that level where it's just city council, then I had to create an LLC so that they could pay me officially. So I'm just like, okay, I guess Hannah McClellan Media, like that fits. It's my name. And the reason that I chose to use my middle name, because once again, history lesson, my maiden name is Long. So I was born Hannah McClellan Long. Then I got married. My name is now Hannah McClellan Reuter. But back whenever I worked at the bank, the first bank, whenever I was fresh out of high school, I just kept having these issues because the name tags at Great Southern said your full name, so it would say Hannah Long. And I kept having customers find me online, and it's not because I'm just so absurdly cute that people couldn't help themselves. I think it's just that whenever you work in a context like that where, I don't know, you don't really expect, this is going to sound so stupid, but like on the street, I could be here, but you walk into a bank in like a professional setting, I'm like here, just because it's not what people expect to like interact with someone they might find attractive in. So I think it was the combination of all those things. Also, like I was working in a smaller town, and it was just not like the lines got blurred, and I was uncomfortable with it. So I changed my name on social media to my middle name, which is McClelland. So everyone who knew me knew that was like still me, but I didn't have to worry about people finding me online. And that just kind of stuck. And then whenever I started my own business, all of my social media accounts were Hannah McClelland for that reason. And also I was about to get married that year. I was getting married in October. This is in February. So I'm like, it's not really worth it to make it long because that's going to change. Don't want to make it ruder. So I just settled with Hannah McClelland Media. That was great. So worked with them. And then once I was doing that, I was kind of like, you know what? I'm bored at work. I've got this time. Might as well like make a little Canva logo, make an Instagram page. So I did all that stuff. And then I sent out a bunch of like cold call Instagram messages, like emails for anyone I could find, just to see what would happen. And that was at a time that not a lot of people were doing social media like this. People would have an internal social media manager, or it was like the manager of their business that would do it for them. But there weren't just people around that did social media. And I learned very quickly that people weren't always very open-minded to new concepts. So I got a couple responses out of probably 40 or 50 messages that I sent out that were wanting to hear me out. And when I tell you I took those meetings so seriously, I would put together a 4 to 10 page presentation of why they should work with me. I would take the customer out to lunch on my own dime because I had no money in my business account yet. And I would like basically do cost comparisons. And I would say, say if I was pitching to a coffee shop, here's how many coffees you have to sell to pay for the service. And again, at this point, I was charging less than nothing. I was charging not an arm and a leg. I was charging like a pinky nail. That's what I was charging. So I would put everything I had in these presentations, try and wow them to everything else. And I actually signed a few clients, and I was completely blown away. So then I was scrambling to like, do I do a contract? Like, what am I figuring? I got to do this. So I kind of was in trial by fire doing this campaign, doing a couple other things. Then I started taking on a few trades. Like I was trading for my eyelashes at the time. I was trading for my gym membership and running their account. So I kind of got to build my portfolio just doing a few things. And then we got to May, where I had been paid for the campaign. That had ended in April, and I had a few clients, but nothing crazy, probably like 4 or 5, middle ground. I wasn't making enough to supplement or to replace my income, just a nice supplement. Because at that time I was on salary, I was making pretty decent money, and I was still living by myself. I had luckily just paid off my car. I had gotten all of my school debt paid off. So I had a little bit of savings, but not a lot. I was living by myself. We were set to get married and to close in a house later that year. So I wasn't really in a situation where I should be making drastic life changes. So I get recruited to this company. to go work for them and be a copywriter, which in the marketing world, a copywriter is somebody who just writes blog posts, who writes captions, who researches keywords and SEO, and then writes basically blogs. Like that was my goal, is like I would get assigned, write 10 500-word blogs for this solar company. So you're researching and coming up with topics, then typing them up. And it's very boring, but I've always been pretty good at BSing my way through things, especially where writing is concerned. Hang on. Whatever. It doesn't matter, especially where writing is concerned. So I loved that job. And they also had kind of recruited me over saying that, you're starting your own business. You can do both of these things. You can work for us 4 days a week. You can work from home on Fridays. You can do both things. Like, it'll be great. And I had several meetings with the managers and the owners, and they were like, no, this would be so perfect. Like, you'll get to experience all these different sides of marketing. We don't even do social media, so there's no conflict. Like, everything is great. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It was a little pay cut, but then to me, the prospect of being able to supplement my own income and grow my business, that was so worth it. And getting to work from home half the time, love. So I said, absolutely, sign me up. So I quit my job at the construction company, went to go work for them. And 3 days into it, again, at this point, I have contracts with clients. They're nothing huge, but there's like 4 or 5 people that I've already gotten to work with me. It's like a decent amount of money, and not, it's not going to cover my rent, but it's enough. And they come to me with my paperwork and they're like, hey, here's all your stuff. Just go through this and sign it and get it back to us. I'm looking through it. There's like a 6-page non-compete that says no portfolio management, no photography, no social media management, no outside marketing, literally everything that I am trying to do. So I went and talked to the manager and I was like, hey, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's just a formality. We can't, everyone has to sign one. It is what it is. So I call my fiance at the time. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? So he's like, well, let's talk to a lawyer and just see what they say. So we talked to a lawyer friend, and he was like, well, they might not enforce it, but at the same time, if you think this business of yours is going to go anywhere, then they could come back and sue you. Like, it's just dicey. If you want it to build this business, then I wouldn't do it. So of course, and then I'm agonizing over it. I'm like, I just quit my job, and I had a higher paying job, and I quit it after like 8 months to come work at this company. And now they're going to hit me with this non-compete. And I felt so stupid because I'm like, should I have seen this coming? Should I have known? Did I not ask the right questions? And I just felt like I had gotten bamboozled and duped and all of these things. So I'm beating myself up over it. And of course, we're still getting married. We're working on our mortgage for the house, and you're not even supposed to make drastic purchases, let alone quit your job. But everyone in my life was so supportive. And my parents were like, do what you got to do. And my father-in-law, who has, been in the corporate world and has run his own business, he's like, if there's ever a time to do it now. And it was just one of those things that I would have expected all the, the adults in my life to be like, you should probably play it safe. Like, see if you can go back to your other company and see if you can find something else. And everyone was so encouraging about it. And I remember praying about it and just thinking, this isn't that bad. Maybe this is what I needed to just get kicked out of the nest and to start my own business, because had I not had this experience, I never would have been brave enough, or never would have wanted to, because I really liked working in the corporate world. I like a set schedule. I like a set salary. I like that the responsibilities on me. I like all those things. And I was never somebody who aspired to be an entrepreneur or a business owner. I just kind of stumbled into it. God said, this is what we're doing. Literally, that's what happened to me. So I kind of came to a conclusion. I'm going to talk to them, and if they want me to sign it or I can't work there, I'm going to quit, and I'm going to give it the summer, because it was May at that point. Like, I'll give it until August. That's still a couple months before the wedding. So if I don't have my income replaced, like at least my monthly income, then I will go quit, or I will go back to working in finance, because at least I have my degree to go back on, and there's always jobs there. It's good money. It's stable, whatever. So I made myself that promise, and I went in and talked to my boss, and I was like, hey, I can't sign this. It's in direct conflict with my work. It's not what you told me to expect. I can't do this. And they were like, well, you can't work here unless you sign it. So I quit after 3 days. So I'm not going to say that. I was going to say it's not my proudest moment. Actually, that is, because I stood up for myself and I stuck to my guns and I walked out, and I said to a grown man at my ripe little age of 22, I was like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to do my own business. And he had kind of scoffed at me and been like, okay, like, let us know if you ever need to come back. And I didn't. Spoiler alert, I didn't have to go back. So that was terrifying. The first few months I did not know what to do with myself. Of course, our mortgage lender was like, what? I said, don't even buy a mattress and you quit your job? luckily Austin had a good job and he could put the team on his back and take us through that whole situation. So that was good. But yeah, that was not ideal, but timing in life rarely is. The first few weeks, I did nothing except email, call, email, call. I showed up to places. I dropped off business cards. Like I was pounding the pavement. I was out all the time. And I had actually applied to a couple jobs just because I was still nervous. And I remember not really telling even my fiance that I was still applying to jobs because I just didn't want to show that I was insecure about what I could do. But I'm like, I have to have a backup plan. Like I'm not used to this whole like fly by the seat of your pants and whatever. So I had applied to this job at a nonprofit and I actually really liked the cause and I really clicked with the director of everything. But by the time I made it to the last round of interviews and they ended up offering me the job, I had already signed 2 or 3 more clients. So I ended up getting to this point where I had this job offered to me, which the salary was great, everything was great. And a year ago, or even 4 months ago, before I had started this business, that would have been a dream. I'd be like, yes, a million times, yes, this is amazing. But in the position I was in, I had just signed a few clients and I had gotten enough yeses that I was like right on the cusp of replacing my income. And I was like, I'm gonna go pass on the job. And I told him the honest truth. I'm like, I just went out on my own. It's starting to pick up some steam. I just need to bet on myself and see how this is gonna go. And I really sincerely appreciate it. And we had a good conversation. He was very kind and supportive. And I decided to turn it down. And for me, that was another vote of confidence because quitting the job for me was like, okay, well, I'm quitting it, but I can always go somewhere else. There's always other options. I can get a different job. And then a month later, whenever I was offered, kind of a lifeline and then choosing to turn that down and feeling peace about that, that's when I really felt kind of justified and I felt assured and like God was saying, you get another chance. You can take this life route, like take the safe route if you want to, but here's the rest of the ocean. Like if you want to just keep swimming in it. So I did. And honestly, it was just kind of a roller coaster. Like for the first year probably, I'll give it from May to December. So the rest of that year, I was taking on small clients, but I was so happy about everything I was doing. I was doing like little logo projects, little one-off things and little content shoots. And I can't express to you how many times I was just shut down and how many people that either I would go in person or I was in emails and you don't even get passed up the food chain because everyone's like, oh, social media. Yeah, I don't really know about that. And it gave me a lot of practice handling rejection because I don't always deal with that very well. I still don't like it, but I'm better. Because at that point, no one in Springfield really welcomed hiring a social media manager. And it was just such an uphill battle because it felt like I wasn't taken seriously. And everyone's like, oh, you do social media? Okay, like what does that mean? And it did start to change, I think, around the beginning of that second year. But the first year, I was doing everything I could for free. I was like, oh, you have an event? Do you want me to shoot content? You have this pop-up, do you want me to come in? Or messaging businesses and saying, I would love to just do a content shoot with you for free. I don't need anything. Like I would just love to grow my portfolio, things like that, meeting business owners. And I think the combination of volunteering and doing things for free, in addition to networking through nonprofit work and serving on these boards and committees with business owners and influential people in the area without necessarily needing anything from them or having any asks from them, it allowed me to make these connections without, acting like a social climber. So I could meet women and men that have these amazing companies and businesses and positions and just get to know them and kind of learn from them in a position that isn't, hi, I want what you have to offer me. That was great. And for a long time, I was very intimidated by being the youngest person in all of these rooms because I would be serving on this, committee for a nonprofit event for BCFO or something else. And I'm 18, 19, 20, 21. Everyone else is 30 plus and has these careers and these families and they're so established. And I just struggled with a lot of imposter syndrome being there. And now I can't imagine any other way that my business would have been successful because I had so many people that I could call that I had established this rapport with no guys, no pressure, only the common interest of wanting to do good in the community. That was what helped drive me because whenever I did have my own business, I was like, hey, so-and-so, we know each other from BCFO. Like I'm just starting my own business. If you know anyone who needs social media, I would love to meet with them. And that's what really got me off the ground. And it was just incredible. And I feel like even though it was an uphill battle, it was kind of charmed at the beginning because there were all of these things that were seeds that had been planted previously that I had no idea would ever turn into anything because I never had intended to start this whole endeavor. And once I did, I saw how many things could pan out. So fast forward, year 2 is when things really started to pick up. And that was whenever I saw a shift from more of like what are you doing? Social media? To like, oh yeah, you're doing social media. And I started to get a lot busier. I got more inquiries. People were messaging me, and I stopped having to really cold call people because people were messaging me. And I think I had the advantage of being so early on to social media in that capacity coming to Springfield because, here in the Midwest, we get trends last, that I was one of the only people doing it at the time. So if somebody wanted it, I was one, if not, the only one doing it. So I had that working in my advantage to where I really wasn't competing with anyone at the time. And the other people that were doing social media were more agency, so they could take on bigger clients or they could take on, people with large budgets. But there was no one really filling in that space for the little guy, and that is where I thrive. So if things just started to grow, I started to work with, clients that had bigger names in the area that I was like, why are they reaching out to me? But I was so excited and getting to know other business owners. And I felt like I was really kind of getting enveloped into this community of people that were out on their own. So that being said, things shift so quickly from people looking at you kind of down their nose and being like, what is she doing? To what is she doing? I want to do that. And it's crazy because it's like people root for you. I'm saying two different things. One, people will judge you and kind of laugh at you and be skeptical until you start to do something. And then everyone's like, oh, yeah, I knew all along. That's amazing. Like, you're so great. And on the other side, people will cheer for you and be like, you're amazing. Like, you're doing such great things. And then you get to a certain point and they're like, who does she think she is? Like, what is she even doing? Like, she's overpriced. This is ridiculous. It's not that big of a deal. So just the opinion and the way that you can kind of be perceived and treated. And, part of that is things that were said to me directly. Part of that is things that I heard through the grapevine or from people in my life and my circle. And that was a struggle for me too, because I'm like, how do people go from not believing in you to believing in you to wanting to do what you're doing to judging you and thinking that you don't deserve it? Like, how does it flip so quickly? Because I vividly remember like certain comments that were made about like, okay, well, social media, like, let's see how long it lasts. Then all of a sudden people were like, I would love to pick your brain. I'd love to have coffee with you and pick your brain. And I'll, get into that. But then turning it around to being like, she doesn't even work that hard. Like, what does she do? Take photos? And I'm like, how has this whole thing gone like this? Where, in public perception shouldn't really matter. But as a young, impressionable female, to me, it does, unfortunately. So I struggled with that at the beginning, just like not knowing how I should be viewing myself because I already had this imposter syndrome. I didn't know if I was doing something crazy. I had just made it to a full calendar year. That was a big milestone for me because being able to make it through the wedding and make it to the following year, I was like, okay, I did it. I made it a whole year. Like, that's a huge thing. And of course, then you got your first tax season and baby, that will get you. So I'm not going to even give tax advice because that's not my place. You should be talking to a professional, of which I'm not. But it's just that taxes are roughly 30% of your income. And I'm fortunate to work in an industry that doesn't have a lot of overhead. So my tax bill is my main expense every year. And it's just very difficult because until I got married, everything that I was making was also going towards my living expenses. So to try and make enough money to pay for all of my existing needs, then to save 30% of it to put back towards taxes, that was a big struggle. So fortunately, I started to kind of widen that gap in the first year. The first year was insane for me. I was working so much and I was just kind of developing a process. That's whenever I switched from doing things manually, like manual invoicing, manual bookkeeping, to having a point of sale system and doing everything more electronically. And I still keep my own books just because I feel comfortable doing it, but it's not that high level. I don't do my own taxes, but it's something that I'm used to from my previous work lives. So that year was insane. I had a lot of struggles with girl vendettas, I guess. Like, I feel like that was a very difficult year for me, losing faith in, the female community. And I had, of course, as we all have, had struggles with mean girls, both in dealing with them and being one. And that was just a very difficult thing for me to accept when it was happening in my professional life, because it was something that I was so protective over and so proud of. And it was so fresh because at that point it wasn't guaranteed. And all my contracts were month to month as they are now. And my income was never guaranteed long-term. So everything that I had to keep fighting for and proving why they should pay me month after month. So when anything would threaten my livelihood, I would get very defensive, very protective. And, I don't want to go into detail because, these things are old. It's been 2 years, but I had a situation where I found another person who was coming into the industry in social media. It was sent to me that her website was almost verbatim what mine was. It read the exact same way. The names were changed and the university was changed, but my website said something that was very personal to me, and it said something like, I fall more in love with social media every day, and I can't wait to share that with you, and so on. It was very, I had taken the time to be very meticulous with how I wrote it and how personal it was to me and so on. And then to see that with somebody else's name attached to it, it just felt like a knife in my heart, because I'm like, this is my baby. This is what I quit my job for. I risked it. I don't have, a safety net. I have the chance to go back and get another job, but like, this is me gambling. And to see someone kind of tack it on after I had made it to that point, like I feel like I had climbed up this hill the entire first year, and everyone's like, is she going to fall off? Like, what's going on? And then as soon as I make it over that plateau, that's when everyone's like waiting to shoot you. So sorry for like grotesque imagery, I guess, but that was very disheartening for me. And I, at my core, am not a confrontational person. I'm not somebody who's like, F you, like you owe me this. It was more hurtful than anything, because I'm like, I would have never done that to somebody else. And especially in a creative industry where our merit is our creativity. I'm like, you couldn't have done that for yourself. And I just debate. I'm like, do I say something? Do I not? Do I just let it go? Like, do I brush it off? And ultimately I was like, I'm not going to let it shake me. I'm not going to let it bother me. If somebody can't create their own copy for their website, they're not going to be my competition anyways. So I moved on. Then a similar thing happened a couple more times, in varying capacities. And then the part that really hit me the hardest is that I had a few situations where people that were more in my circle, like my friends or my acquaintances, that wanted to have coffee or have dinner, and we would chat about work as you do. And I'm giving them, I'm young and naive, and I'm like, oh yeah, here's how much I charge. Here's what I do. Here's how I do this. Here's how I do that. And there was one situation where somebody had dinner with me and asked me all of these things. And then I was approached by someone else, and they're like, oh, so-and-so's starting a business, but they said not to tell you, and it's in social media. And I was like, and the thing that really hurt me with that is that I would have still given the same information away. It was the secret. Why does it have to be a secret? We can all coexist. I couldn't take on every business in Springfield if I wanted to. So the fact that I felt like I was on the outside, and I felt like I had been kind of used again, I'm like, I like you. I thought that we were friends. I thought that we were having a good time. And, a similar thing happened later with a closer friend. And I just really started to get kind of jaded and think that everyone was out to get me, and no one was actually happy for my successes. And it was just a very difficult thing, because I was so bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I was having so much success on the client front that I had no idea that the social side of it, or the friend side of it, would be so difficult. And the thing that has made me kind of turn a corner with that, even this year, because for a while I was like, that person did me dirty. Fortunately, those things haven't shaken my business. I haven't slowed down. I haven't seen an interruption in my demand. So that I praise God for, because every time, I'm a big believer that you just don't go away mad, just go away. And I don't block people unless it's really warranted, like if they're copying my stuff. But for the most part, I unfollow somebody and I move on. And there's not a need to sling mud. There's not a need to be angry. It's still Springfield. It's still a small town. But I can be hurt and still move on. And I can choose not to be angry at somebody, but not trust them anymore. And it did change how I view my interactions. If somebody just wants to pick my brain, then unfortunately that's a consulting meeting, and I'm going to have to charge you for it, because at some point I can't just be giving away all this information that I've painstakingly learned and sacrificed and gambled on for free. So if I could research it and I could learn it in a time that there wasn't nearly as many resources, which I know that sounds crazy because it was only 3 years ago, but it truly was such a different landscape, then someone can either pay me to learn that, or they can find the information that I did, because it's all out there and you can learn it, or you can take the time to learn it like I did through trial and error. And I know that might sound conceited, but it did take me a long time and a lot of, mistakes to acquire that information. So to just give it to everyone for free and be like, oh yeah, here's all this little stepping stones, just jump over everything I had to swim through, it's no big deal, then that is cheating out all of my hard work. And it took me a while to realize that I really had anything to offer in that realm. But now I know that, and I don't just give away information for free. And I really have struggled with that too, because I'm like, who am I to be charging? And especially whenever you have that line where it's someone that you really like, but they're not really a close friend, but like they really want to get into the industry. I have a hard time discerning where the line is, because I want to be helpful and I don't want to gatekeep. And I don't want to say like, sorry, you can book an appointment with me through my website and I will send you an invoice. I don't want to be that girl, but at the same time, I've been used dozens of times by people who just want information or they just want a leg up or they just want clients or they just want a job. And that's so undescribably hurtful. Indescribably, I believe is the actual word. But it's very painful because then you start to feel a little bit dehumanized. Like, did you really want to be my friend and have coffee with me? Or did you just want to know my pricing? Did you just want to know all these things? So that was really the biggest struggle for me in year 2 was that I felt like I was, and of course we all feel, a little bit like the protagonist in our own narrative, but I felt like I had a target on my back because it happened probably 6 distinctive times and then a dozen other little times. And I'm like, why is this happening? Like, am I doing something wrong? Am I being too open with things? Like, why is everyone coming for my business all of a sudden? And then in that year, I probably saw 10 more social media businesses pop up. And, that's the name of the game. That is, especially in a small business environment like Springfield, we've all seen this happen. You've got one person pops out with linking and then everybody's doing linking. One person pops out with what's it right now? Charm bracelets, and everyone's doing charm bracelets. You've got the hats. Hats are everywhere, and all of those are great ideas. And every business, I think, has their own twist and their own specialty. And while I do think it's good to have the competition and to have a place where multiple different fun ideas like that can thrive, it is frustrating whenever you feel like you have just gotten to a place of more security, and now it's not insecurity because everyone thinks that your business and your industry is a joke. Now it's insecurity because you have all this competition. So I feel like I got out of what is it? Out of the frying pan into the fryer. I don't know. Whatever that phrase is. I feel like I got out of the volcano and into this snake pit. So that was a big struggle, but I just kind of stayed the course and I found out who, really had my back. And I learned so much about myself and how to conduct myself. And not to say that I handled everything perfectly because I don't think that I probably did, but I handled everything in the way that I thought I would be able to look back on and not regret anything. Like, there's nothing that I have said that I would look back on and be like, ooh, I wish I hadn't texted. I wish I hadn't said that, because I didn't. And there were a lot of things that I kind of was down on myself thinking like I should have stood up for myself more. I should have asserted myself or done this. And I think that for me, the fewest regrets come when you say the least, especially when you're upset. So for the most part, I just am like, okay. And I remember and I know where to put my trust, and that's that. So you kind of take those lessons and you move on. And to this day, I don't really have any ill will towards anyone. I don't know if the same can be said for me, but the thing that has really helped me turn a corner with that is knowing that no one, I can't speak for them, I guess, but assuming that no one in any of those situations looked at me and they were like, screw her, like, screw Hannah, she sucks. Actually, I could do that way better. I want to see her crash and burn. It was more selfish on their part. It was not, I want to see Hannah fail. It was, I want to see myself succeed. The rest is just collateral damage. So that I know is still kind of cynical to think about, but there's a world of difference between people who want to see you fail and people who just want to see themselves succeed. And that realization really helped me, which I know I talked about this with Haley, but that helped me kind of set myself free from that. I'm like, they weren't targeting me. They weren't victimizing me. It wasn't me. It was just what I had and what I was doing at the time that made them, they wanted that for themselves. And, we're all selfish people by nature. I can't blame anybody for wanting to succeed. So when you have something that exists in a public realm, success doesn't exist in a vacuum. Everybody wants to have it for themselves. And especially when something is new and shiny, like my work was at the time, you can't expect people to not jump on it. So anyways, I had to mature and learn that you really sometimes just don't get to be vindicated for everything that you feel like was done to you. But it helped me grow. Year 3 last year was the craziest year. And I vividly remember sitting with Bree podcasting and being like, this year I think is slowing down, because January of 2023, I was kind of having a lull. I'm like, I'm not really setting new clients. I'm not really getting that much new business. And I was so fortunate and am to not really have to cold call anybody. So I kind of just relied on word of mouth and the demand that was constantly kind of coming in. And there just was kind of a dry spell. And I'm like, you know what, maybe this is God telling me it's time to slow down. It's time to, enjoy more of life, because you were really pedal to the metal all of 2022. So that lasted about 2 months. And then things just completely ramped up. And it was so busy. It was constant. I was getting huge clients. I was getting new demand and contracts. And I'm having to write custom quotes because everything is so much bigger than I'm used to. And I had a couple situations that challenged me professionally because I was put in a predicament where I had to make a decision, and I think I made the wrong decision a couple times. And, you know, you kind of have to humble yourself and apologize or eat your words and be like, I'm so sorry. I thought I knew how to handle this. I don't, or I thought I was equipped to take this on. I'm not, it's over my pay grade. I don't think I'm the best fit for you. Those are very difficult situations to be in and conversations to have, because of course you want to be prideful and think that you are the best, and you want to be able to think you can take on anything. And sometimes me being a team of one, I just can't. And that has to be okay sometimes. So year 3 taught me a lot about how to have difficult conversations. Also, I think it helped my anxiety in the sense that there were a lot of situations that I would have considered worst case outcomes. Are they worst case? No, they were not worst case. But from my limited vantage point, looking at a situation and thinking, okay, this is the absolute worst thing that could happen. I really hope it doesn't happen. I don't know what I'm going to do if that happens. And then it does. And, you know, you cry to your husband, you freak out a little bit, you pray and you journal and you get all of your angst out and you're nervous for a couple weeks and you feel bad. And then it passes. And, you know, that relationship with whoever it is can be mended. You can also just realize some people won't like my work, and that's okay. And then life goes on. And that really was revolutionary to me, because I had never had such a bad situation with a client. And I didn't really have horrible situations. It was more of things where I think I was biting off more than I could chew, or I overpromised thinking that I would be able to overdeliver and I just wasn't. And that's very difficult. But it taught me that even in the quote worst case scenario, life goes on. You'll survive. Your business will go on. And sometimes it's just difficult, but you always move forward. And you would think that would have given me the opposite effect, but it really challenged me and helped me grow in the sense that, okay, what if that happens? I still have to get up and do all my work for other clients. I still have to, you know, keep moving forward and keep making this money. And, you know, so what? So it really did help me take a lot of that chip off my huge, huge anxiety block that I was dealing with. That was revolutionary for me. Even though all the situations I was praying for the exact opposite outcome, every single bad outcome taught me so much. And I'm so grateful for them now. I don't want to relive them or do them again. And I have learned how to avoid them, but I'm thankful they happened. So then I had the opportunity to sign a travel contract to go to an event in July. July was insane for me. I worked every single day of the entire 31-day month. It was exhausting. I remember like there were several times that I was working from like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. I was stressed out. My poor, amazing, sweet husband was like bringing me dinners and lunches and food to my office at the house, because I was like, there's just so much to do, but there was so much demand. And I was trying to get ahead to go on this week-long work trip, because I still had all of my, you know, month-long deliverables to meet, but I had a whole week that I was going to be gone. So I wanted to get everything done before I left. So it was just a constant grind, trying to fit in shoots, taking on freelance projects, because I'm like, you never know when the well's going to dry up. And then from there, I had a few other clients that saw me on this trip. They're like, oh, I didn't know you would travel. I didn't know you did that stuff. So then they reached out and wanted to book me for their own things. So I went to Dallas in July. August, I went to Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C. September, I went to Las Vegas. And I was just traveling, and it felt like I was gone constantly. And I kind of was, just because the month is so short when you're busy, and it's so much shorter when you have to take a week out of it, because then the week beforehand you're preparing for it. You're doubling up on your work. You're doubling up on shoots, getting everything done. Then you're gone for a week, and then you get back and you're catching up and you're trying to respond. And I just didn't want any of my clients to feel my absence, because, you know, if I have a client in Springfield that's paying me for, you know, 4 weeks worth of work, but I'm inaccessible for one of those weeks, then they might start to get testy and be like, is the work going to get done? You know, so I still have all these things to uphold. So that was a lesson in time management, juggling everything. I was just completely balls to the wall, working 24/7. And I loved it, but it did give me a different perspective shift, because I vividly remember, and again, I've talked about this before. If you listen to every episode, I'm so sorry, but I've talked about before where I was at this hotel room in Vegas. It was at the end of all my traveling. I had been kind of just running ragged for months, and I got to a point that I was sitting in the hotel room in my nice outfit, looking out at the Vegas Strip, like, and it's a giant suite. Like, there's a sunken living room, there's a king size bed, there's a massive opulent bathroom, big tub. I'm like, I had a martini at the little cocktail reception, and I'm there, my head's kind of spinning, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, what is this life? And on the one hand, I was so in awe and so grateful, thinking, how is this my life? Like, how have I been flown out here? I'm in this amazing suite. I'm by myself. I do love to travel by myself. And I'm doing all of these things for this business that's not even 3 years old yet. Wow. Like, I was so in awe. And on the other hand, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, does this matter? I spent this entire week with people who don't know or care who I am, who don't know my last name, who don't really, care to learn it. And I'm just a placeholder. And it was like this warring side of my brain where on the one hand, I'm like, I made it. This is amazing. I could do this forever. And on the other hand, I'm like, my life at home is just going on without me. I feel like it exists in a snow globe and I'm just on the outside of it watching everyone live their lives. And I'm just an expendable part of this ecosystem. So then something shifted in me at that point where I was like, I've been running myself ragged for months. I've been trying to prepare. I've been traveling. I've been doing all these things. And of course, you kind of get this false sense of like accomplishment because there are these strangers online like, oh my gosh, you're always traveling. You're doing so much. You're so busy. And that kind of inflates your sense of self-worth. And you're like, I am so busy. I am so season 5 Brooke Davis. I am so girl boss. I am so slay. I am so Miranda Priestley, whatever else. And you start to think that's what matters because people are telling you that's what matters and that you're so great. And they can't tell you enough of those things to kind of assuage the emptiness that you feel in your soul. Because at some point I'm like, okay, anyone could be here filming this. Anybody could be here making TikToks. Maybe I'm a good fit. Maybe they enjoy having me here, but I'm still just a placeholder. Like I'm just a person. So then of course I got all existential and everything else. And I came back home and I was like, I'm gonna stop traveling for a while work-wise because I just need to settle back in. And you do kind of get burnt out because when you're cranking out content more than you're even consuming content, you lose ideas. Like you just don't have a lot to say and so on. So I did need to take a break just to let things restock and not in that, I don't want to sound like a starving artist being like, oh, I just had to let my creative juices come back in. But genuinely in the social media world, you have to stay on trend and you have to know what's going on. And I wasn't able to be on social media enough to even know what was going on. So then I'm not able to produce the level of content that my clients expect from me. So I decided to taper off and not do as much, kind of dial it back in. And then, of course, you guys know going into November, I was slowing down and that's whenever we had all of our emotional issues and everything. So I'm not going to dive into all that because that's going to be a whole other episode. But we went through a lot as a couple and in our marriage and that had shifted my mental health and my dynamic anyways towards work. But now going into this 3-year, I had my 3 anniversary. I'm working on year 4 now. It's just crazy because I can see so much change and how many times I've pivoted. Like year 1, I was so green and so eager and naive and excited. And I think I was so on fire for this business. Then year 2 was whenever I got a little bit of a taste of, people aren't always nice. People aren't always good natured. And that made me tougher. Year 3, I saw almost every dream I had, like traveling for work, making certain amounts of money. Like last July, not to be crude and talk about money, but for perspective, the first year in May through December, I made my salary. So if I would have had the full year, I would have made my salary plus a little bit more. But I made my salary and I remember being like, I did it. Like, hell yes. I made my salary in less than a year. I'm so proud of myself. I'm so happy. Granted, that was gross. So after taxes, a little bit different. The next year, I made over double my salary. I was like, are you kidding me? Are you actually kidding me? I did not even know this was possible. The next year, I made that much plus what would have been my additional salary and so on. Then last July, I almost made my salary in a month. And I remember being like, I felt this taste of, one, I could do this forever. I am addicted to making money. I think this is the most important thing in the world. Like this dangerous, almost like lust and greed for money, being like, I have never seen this kind of cash coming in. I'm so obsessed. I'm so addicted. This is what I was meant to do. To the point that I even told my husband, I'm like, I don't want to have kids yet. This is addicting to me. This is like a drug. And that was a disagreement that we had because I came home, from my trip and I'm like, I can see myself doing this for so long. I just genuinely feel so on fire. I want to work so much harder to make all this money. And of course, through the course of traveling and being gone all the time, I did burn myself out a little bit because it's not super sustainable. But it was just so drastic. And then to go full circle and have such an emotional, first such a draining season, then such an emotional loss and difficult end of the year. And then now coming into, this next year, obviously my life priorities are changing. I want to start a family. I want to see myself in the next stage. And celebrating this milestone is so huge because 1 year, amazing. 2 years, okay, it starts to feel legitimate. 3 years, I've been doing this for 3 years. This is now the longest job I've ever had, which is crazy. And I know that there's probably a different generation that's like the longest job you've ever had is 3 years. But listen, I'm 25. Okay, give me a break. Now I've worked for myself longer than I've worked for anyone else. which is it's such an honor and so humbling to be able to say. But I just don't know if it's growth or if it's burnout. But I feel like this year, the milestone was more like that's awesome. Cool. And I kind of moved on. Whereas last year, I'm like, this is my life. This is everything. And for a while, I'm like, it's a bummer. I'm hitting 3 years. I thought I want to do a fun photo shoot. I thought I'd want to do all these things. And I'm just really not feeling it. Like, it's now, there's my business and there's my life. Beforehand, my business and my life were kind of one. Like, the Venn diagram was just a circle. And now I'm like, I'm proud of myself. That's really awesome. Like, my first love, my first baby, I made it to 3 years. That's amazing. I'm so happy. And that's cool. So I was disappointed that I didn't have this crazy, intense reaction. But at the same time, I'm proud of myself because for so long, this was my mountain to climb. This was my Everest. This was everything I wanted. This was going to, define how I felt about myself. And now to get to the point where it's not everything, I think is an even bigger victory for me because I made it everything. It was everything I wanted. I got this award that I wanted. I got these financial milestones. We saved this money for our kids' futures, and like we did all these things. And now I can confidently say that I think my biggest milestone is not letting it rule me anymore and getting to the point where I'm proud of it. I love my work. I want to keep working hard, but it's not everything and it's not me. I am not my business. My business is not me. It's something that I do and something that I've built, but it's not everything that I am. And that was a very difficult thing for me to learn too, because being so new, I think that in the grand scheme of the world, I'm still considered a startup, like a very new business. And not having made it to 5 years yet, I still kind of feel this like, okay, if I slow down now, does that mean that I've failed? If I slow down now, is that going to take away from my success? Because now I'm very, very picky about who I take on, and I'm very selective with who I'll take meetings with and who I don't. And I'm not really negotiating or lowering prices like I have in the past. This is how it is. And this is what I can do. And that's, if you don't want to work with me, that's also totally fine. There's so many great people I can refer you to, but I am making less than I have in the past. And once you know kind of where that ceiling is and then you fall short of it, you start to wonder, like, is this normal? Am I failing? Like, and I talk to Austin all the time. I'm like, are you mad at me? Am I being lazy? Am I doing all these things? And he's like, no, you're still working. You're still like bringing in good income. Just because you're not like at 159% all the time doesn't mean that you're failing. So I think that my misconception was that success is always linear and it's always going up, and my trajectory and my income and everything should always be going up. And I got to a point where I kind of hit that, quote, peak of what I can do on my own, how much time I can exhaust, how much of myself I can devote, and realizing that, oh, I don't really want that forever. Like, there's always a trade-off. And for me, I wasn't really seeing Austin. I wasn't seeing my friends at all. I wasn't getting to work out. I wasn't getting to even just go to the pool during the summertime. And it really took a toll on me. In that sense, I was thriving in the work world. I was like, I'm on top of the world. But I didn't realize it until, the next month. And I was doing something so silly and arbitrary, like trying to make an Instagram recap of that month. And I was like, oh, shoot, all I did was work. I don't have anything to post. This is really not good. And the implications of that didn't really hit me until a few months down the road, whenever I started to really feel it emotionally and feel that exhaustion. But I think that all of it was necessary for growth. And it's just really cool to look back and see, how God changed me and how many times I've pivoted. And on the one hand, if you would have told me back whenever I was working at the bank 5 years ago, like, hey, one day you're going to be waking up on a Wednesday, going to get a coffee, going to podcast record, not caring about how much time it takes, and go home, work from your home office, work with clients that are your best friends in the world. And that's it. You're going to be making great money, more than you're making now. And it's going to be relatively, low stress compared to how it could be. I'd be like, oh my gosh, sign me up. Like, where's the freaking time machine, baby? But if you would have told me, last July, whenever I was at my peak, both in income and how busy I was and everything else, if you would have told me like, hey, a year from now, you're going to be full on trying to start a family. You're really going to be kind of like, my business is secondary. I'm taking it slower. I'm not really adding new clients for the summertime. I would have been like, girl, get up. Like, what are you doing? There's money to be made. Like, there are things to be accomplished. And it really is just crazy, the transformation that you go through as a small business owner and how you view the world. And there is a time that I would have looked at myself now and thought that, she's lazy, she's weak, she's not ambitious enough. But there's also a time that I would have looked to myself now and been like, thank God I can get there one day. Thank God I can take a deep breath and not define myself by all this and, you're telling me that I can get out of this rat race one day. And it would have given me so much hope. So I know that this version of me is one version of me's saint and another version of me's disappointment. And that's okay, because I think that my priorities have not always been something that I could 100% trust. And from my limited vantage points in different stages of my life, I've not always seen things 100% clearly. So I don't know. I think that I'm just proud of everything that I've learned and been taught and everything that God has brought me through. And if anything, I have learned that God always has a plan. Things don't always seem like they're making sense in the moment, but there's always a payoff. And even if it's years down the road, being able to look back and be like, oh, that was it. And, you know, as much as it seems counterintuitive, then maybe the immense success that I had last year was to show me that's not what I want forever. That's not what I want of life. Because I mentioned in the episode where I talked about my miscarriage that I was always insecure about not feeling overly maternal or not feeling like I would be a good mom, because it wasn't my deepest desire. I had never daydreamt about being a mom, and I was always nervous, like, what if that comes and I'm not happy with it? So I think that almost reaching this peak and getting to that point of everything that I thought that I wanted, and then being like, I'm still missing something. Like, there's something else here. And realizing that if I were to do that for my entire life, I would be depleted and I would be empty and I would be replaceable. That was maybe what I needed. And while that's a pretty blessed way to learn a hard lesson, then you just never know like what you're being forged into. Anyways, I don't want to get onto my soapbox any more than I already am. But there's that lyric by Olivia Rodrigo in Making the Bed, I believe. Again, I'm really into pop right now, and it says something like, "I got everything I wanted, but it's not what I imagined." And I think that's what I was feeling. Like, it was everything that I wanted, but then you start to forget, or you start to, I guess, realize how much you want little things, like how much you want to just, go get a coffee from a barista that you know and that knows your name, and how much you love not living out of a suitcase and having little moments running into your husband in the house while you're both passing through from different things. And I don't know, it made me just cherish so much of life more. And I'm so thankful for that. And not that I wouldn't travel again, I just wouldn't commit to a lifestyle of travel again. So also crazy. This is the first month in almost a whole year that I have not flown anywhere. So last July I went to, I guess not flown, but like left to go somewhere. Last July, obviously I went to Dallas, flew to Dallas. Then in August, I guess I also went to Dallas, but it was for a personal thing. Then I went to New York, Philly, and DC. Then September I went to Vegas and Florida. And October, I went to Charleston. November, we spent the weekend in Arkansas, which is a little baby trip, but it was still fun. Then in December, I went to Miami, which is where we left for like a little family cruise. So we went to Puerto Rico and a bunch of other places I don't really remember. And then February, I went back to Charleston. March, I went to Las Vegas. What month is after March? April. Where did I go in April? Oh, I went to Scottsdale. So this is the first month I haven't gone anywhere, and it's honestly really nice. And I know that this is the most champagne problem I've mentioned the entire time. But I have 2 trips coming up in June, and after that, I seriously don't want to travel anymore. I love to do it. I love to travel, and I can't even express, like, I love going to the airport and flying alone. I feel so happy and fulfilled, and I'm just like listening to my music, it just feels like a whole different universe. Like, literally nobody cares who you are. I can go get a coffee. I'm walking around. It just feels like you're in a movie, which is always my favorite fantasy. And I love it. Like, it's just time to yourself. It feels like you exist independently of the rest of the world, because time doesn't exist in airports. So I'm really going to cherish flying, because one of the trips I'm going to see my brother in Charleston, because we're going to have a little family vacay and then move him home. My parents are driving because they have to help him move home. And they're like, "Do you want to just drive with us?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm going to be flying, but I'll meet you there." So miss me with the road trip. I love my family, but I cannot be in the car for that long. They will not love me afterwards. And it's almost symbolic for me, because I don't want to travel for a while. I want to just soak up being home. And it's symbolic to get to have this like last flight by myself, because last July was my first flight by myself. And it kind of sparked this whole journey within me of, look at everything that I can do and everything I can handle and all of these things that I can juggle at one time. And then now to come almost a full calendar year later, going on this flight by myself to move my brother home. And I don't know, I'm definitely gonna have like an eat, pray, love moment where I'm gonna like wrap my cardigan around myself and look out the window and be like, wow. And like I'm Miley Stewart, like waving at the glass. I don't know. I'm gonna be obnoxious with it, but it's just been so transformational, so amazing. Where am I even going with all this? Oh, also, I just think I need to stop traveling, because I eat like absolute garbage a lot of the time. But whenever I'm traveling, it's that much worse. And I was talking to Austin. I'm like, I wonder how much of a toll this has taken on me that I haven't even realized, because 1 week out of every month, at least 4 days out of every month for a year, I have not been in town, and I've just been absolutely gorging myself with food and not working out and everything. So I don't think it's taken a huge toll, but I also wonder from like my energy levels and my productivity, how nice it's going to feel to not always be prepping to get ahead and then catching up, because that's become such a normal thing for me. And traveling is such a blessing. It's so amazing. And it's something that I didn't really ever do growing up. Like, we weren't a family vacation family. And I didn't start traveling until I was in college. And even then I was doing it in a really questionable way because it was expensive. So I'll go into all my cheap travel trips eventually. But beside the point, it's just nice. It feels like I'm putting a little cap on this chapter of my life, and I'm thrilled about that. Sorry, I was trying to make this a short episode. I don't think that it was, but I just had a lot to say, and I'm feeling very happy and fulfilled. And I want to give the most special thank you to my clients that took me out to such a special, sweet dinner on Wednesday last week. I didn't expect it, and I don't ever expect anyone to want to celebrate my milestones. It's kind of like an internal thing. I should be proud of myself, and that should be enough for me. And except for Austin, he has to celebrate with me. He's obligated. It's in our marriage contract. But just the fact they took me out to dinner, and they were so kind, and they, gave me the sweetest cake and presents, and just to have those things were amazing. But just to have the group of women that wanted to give up their evenings, and I know they're so busy. I know they have kids. I know they worked all day, all of these things. The fact that it was important enough to them to take time out of their life to spend the evening with me. I was literally about to cry in the restaurant. I was like, you guys, what are you doing here? I'm like, what do you mean you want to celebrate me? And it was just the most happy, fulfilling thing I could have ever asked for. So thank you to everyone who wished me congratulations. Thank you to everyone who's made this entire journey possibility for 3 years and allowing me to have the time to even do this podcast and blah, 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 blah. So I'm very thankful. I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed with all the happiness. Side note, I've been feeling like I should start vlogging. I don't know where this is coming from, but I don't know if I want to start doing like YouTube, but it's like this nagging thing in the back of my head where I always think, oh my gosh, I should start doing vlogs. I should start posting more day in my lives. I should do all these things. And then I get mad at myself because I didn't start doing it like 2 years ago, because I've done so many cool things since then. And then I'm like, what's the point now? Like, I've already done all my cool things. I'm not going to do any more, so I shouldn't vlog now. But then I end up having that same moment again. So I don't know. If you guys would watch it, let me know. If you wouldn't, like, I'll probably just keep beating myself up and not doing it. But it's been on the dome recently. So as always, thank you for listening. Make sure you treat yourself on Friday. Have all mountains, no valleys. And let me know what you think of this episode if you guys want to chit chat. Love you lots. Thank you for listening. Bye.